Well, the Carney government announcing a $6.6 billion defense plan this week. Rob Huebert is the director of the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies at the U of C. He joins us this morning. Rob, nice to see you. The focus more about building Canadian production rather than outsourcing to other countries. Your thoughts on this plan?
Well, this has always been something that's always been at the centerpiece of almost any piece of procurement that Canada pursues. We see this particularly being considered and brought out in the Canada shipbuilding strategy. So the act of trying to keep it within Canada, that isn't something new. But what is new is the fact that we actually have an overall policy that is basically providing guidance for how we, in fact, procure our equipment. And second of all, I think a very critically important issue here is it brings it to the forefront. In other words, instead of just having it piecemeal, a shipbuilding strategy here, considerations for any land force improvement there, this consolidates it and presumably will streamline the process, or at least it says it will streamline the process.
So 70% Canadian-made kit is the goal with this plan. What is it now, and how realistic is that goal of 70%?
Well, again, this gets back to the point of why this policy is so needed, is that there's not a good understanding of what our percentage is. There is, to my knowledge, we don't have any sort of tracking of how much goes to Canada, how much goes to outside sources, and any real compatible understanding. Part of this is political. Defense has been so secondary for the preceding governments that they don't want it really known in terms of how badly they've been doing on the procurement side. And so when you ask me, well, where do we stand right now? I don't know. And I don't think many other experts would be able to give you any better of an answer in that context.
Rob, do we have a sense of what this could do for our current reliance on the U.S. and even other nations?
Well, this is one of the embedded factors. Obviously, what's driving this particular policy and some of the statements that Carney has been making is in response to the growing instability of the United States. And I mean, there's a realization, first and foremost, that we may not be able to count on the Americans as we've had in the past. But I also think it builds on the earlier recognition that we had before the Trump destabilization really came into effect, is that we were facing a growing threat from the Russians and possibly the Chinese, and therefore needed to be rearming as fast as we could. So I think those two have combined to really lead to at least a statement of this policy.
It also sounds like there's an element of export along with this strategy. How realistic is that?
Well, we're going to have to change our political culture, because as soon as we export, it sounds good in theory, sort of like we got to get out and we got to, sell our destroyers, our corvettes, or whatever that we are producing. The problem is, as soon as you identify someone that you're going to sell to, that always creates political pushback. The best example was when we were going to sell a series of labs to the Saudi Arabians, and many people said, well, the Saudis are conducting, this war in Yemen. Should we be selling? That's immediately what happens. You can't just sell to the Nordic countries. You're going to have to find other customers that are going to be problematic at certain elements of the political spectrum in Canada.
Okay, lots to follow. As always, we appreciate your insight. That is Rob Huebert, Director of the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies.